Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Feels like a good day today.
It is a good day. Just be aware that this is our episode of 409. We're going to go through the episode here. However, this is a pre-recorded episode. Tommy and I are traveling. We're doing some events around and things, so we won't be able to do this one live at this point. But that being said, we can still talk about our topic.
Yeah.
Tommy, any kind of, I don't think we have any really news or topical. Let's just get, I guess, right into the main topic, I guess.
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right, so this comes from a mailbag item. Tommy's going to read us our topic here today. This is an interesting thing that has come up a couple times in my consulting, and we kind of like to unpack this a little bit and see what this looks like for other organizations. Typically, we do Power BI. Power BI is usually given to organizations who already own Microsoft products, your Azure suite, your Microsoft 365 products suite. And this would be what happens if you have a Google shop.
Yeah.
You're using Google and all their products. How does Power BI fit in, or does it even fit in into your organization? I mean, give us some question here.
And I want to say, keep your mailbags coming because we love the questions and the ideas that you have for us. So this one's pretty straightforward. Mike and Tommy, how can we sell Power BI to a Google Shop company? How easy can Power BI fit into a new data platform in an organization? Woo! I mean,
this is going to be interesting. I think this will be a good topic. So I've had a couple experiences with this one. Well, let's just kick things off to beginning with, right? So if you're using, depends on what kind of Google shop you are, right? If you're a Google shop that's using just like Google Sheets and email, it's probably not too big of a gap for you to use the web version, right? PowerBI.com, and do most of your things in the web, which I would argue right now, like if you asked me like this, 200 episodes ago, might be a bit more difficult to get this done. But now, I think you can pretty much do anything you need to using the web to a degree. There may be some more advanced features you may need to use with Tabular Editor or some scripting things, but my goodness, I'm really impressed by Semantic Link Labs, and that's a notebook, and a notebook can be run in the service. And so a lot of those other automation things that you need to do are now accessible via the service.
So let me ask you, I want to ask you to take a step back here because obviously from the technological migration, yeah, we know it's a lot easier, but I want to break down here the type of person we're dealing with because one, he said, how do we actually sell this, right? Because it's not just, can we migrate over? I think that question is pretty straightforward, right?
That's true. I think the answer to that question would be probably yes, right?
Yeah.
That's probably a good answer to yes. Yes.
Really from any data platform. But the idea here is, let's break down the person, and we can start with Google and then talk about other platforms, but we have to sell this, right? Because there's also a user experience and what people are used to and the skills that people have that are building those products in the Google data platform that you have to go over. You may get the technology over fine, but we still have to deal with people and process.
I agree with that one. As very much so. So maybe I'm going to define, there's probably a couple personas here of how different organizations work with Google, right? For example, I kind of started with the idea of like, do you just own like the Google suite, right? It's just like their business products. And I would say if you're just a business products person, it's probably not too big of a jump to load Google Sheets. There is network drives you can go use to go store things in that you could have files that are pulled from. I would not assume you have SharePoint lists because that's a Microsoft product. That's not a Google product. So I think in that regard, it's not probably as seamless as you would like. There is some friction around like where do you store files, how do you get access to information, but Power BI can talk to any data source system. So if you're using things like SQL servers or have some SQL or Oracle or other servers that are writing SQL, you can easily connect to them and load that data directly into your semantic model. So that's not an issue. I would say, though, typically in Google Shops, they're usually more Mac users in general. So in lieu of that, I would say Power BI Desktop is going to be much more difficult for you to get your hands on. Or you'll be using a VM to spin up a VM to put a desktop on. And to be honest, I don't really love that experience, and it feels just kind of slow and clunky. So in that regard, I would say there is some friction around building reports and semantic models if you are expecting to use Power BI Desktop. What are your thoughts?
No, and I think that's a big point. I haven't seen as much with the Mac users. I was going a different route where Usually, most organizations that at least I've dealt with that are dealing with Google data,
Mhm.
in terms of like BigQuery, they're also very heavily invested in the other products and not just like Gmail and Google Sheets, but they're probably using Google Ad Studio. They're probably doing either Google Analytics,
Sure.
Google Ad Studio,
Yep.
Google YouTube Analytics. So because of the integration, the seamless integration there, that they're probably already dealing with Google products. So to sell them like, hey, we're going to use a new to them a new report visualization platform.
Mhm.
So, but it's seamless for me in Google Data Studio.
So what I would argue though is I think you just my opinion is I think you just jumped into persona number 2, right?
Okay.
So like if you have like the very again persona number 1 maybe is like hey just very basic Google Suite products, right? I'm also assuming you're on a Mac potentially because you're using a browser for basically everything you're doing. There's
Right.
really nothing. There's not a lot of programs that you need on the
No.
Mac that are what you need. So again, no issues. You're just typically and this is not true for all organizations, but why would you be buying a Windows computer if you're going to be using the Google platform system? Like there's really
Right.
you're now mixing
All on the browser.
yeah, right. I mean, maybe I haven't seen organizations use Chromebooks, so that typically feel like that's too lightweight of a computer, right? I typically
Yeah.
see people using like Macs machines to talk to their Google products. So that being said, that's a friction point there. But I think what you're introducing, Tommy, though, is the right second persona, which is okay. We're doing more than just we're heavily Google Analytics. We're doing a lot of marketing. We've got that platform, and Google does make it very easy for you to use Google Analytics and get the data into BigQuery.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading an article recently that was talking about Google BigQuery, and the promise initially at Google BigQuery was all around like massive scale at any kind of query capabilities,
Yeah.
all this really cool stuff. And yes, it is true. You can do massive scale queries on top of Google BigQuery. However, what they were finding was in order to keep costs down, nobody likes to write big, massive queries across a lot of data over and over again because that's expensive. It costs compute to do that. So in Google BigQuery, my understanding is, and Tommy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Google BigQuery charges you per query. It's a
Mm-hmm.
query-based charge
Yeah.
system. So it's like a consumption. How much you consume is how much you're paid for, or paying for. So if your queries are really large and require a lot of data, they charge you per gigabyte of data accessed. Is that right?
I believe so.
Okay. So in lieu of this, so if you think about their pricing model, right? If I could, so let's just imagine, just
Mm-hmm.
dream with me here for a bit, right? If I have a 1 terabyte set of files that I've been storing to Google Analytics in, and I need to run a query, do I want to run a query across all 1 terabyte of data, and that way I'm charged basically for accessing a terabyte of data to do the query,
Right.
or would it be smarter for me to make like a view or a materialized view where I could just query only the last day and then add that information to a smaller table that like aggregates everything up to like a monthly or a weekly or some sort of smaller term, right? So if I can take that 1 terabyte file and figure out what are my aggregations of data and build smaller tables that aggregate the data up to a higher level, then as the new data comes in, I can automatically aggregate it as I go. The queries
Mm-hmm.
get smaller, and now I'm touching like a couple gigabyte file as opposed to a terabyte file, which I think saves me money in the long term. So the article that I was reading was just talking about, right, even though we have this capability, the technology is at scale, can do these massive things for us. You wanted those to be kind of like the edge cases, the rant, the ones that are more random, I guess I would say. And the common scenario is you want to continually be querying the same kind of data in small form, aggregate it, and then only pull from that. So the reason I'm bringing this up is it becomes a cost game. And then you say, well, where do you want to fit Power BI? Where does Power BI fit in that architecture?
And it's interesting too because the mailbag was just asked around Power BI, but when you think of the Google Data Platform, it really has the equivalent of what's in Fabric because it really is
Yes.
more. It's more closer to the Azure Data Platform than I guess
Yes.
Fabric
I would
because
agree with that.
you have pipelines. It's a very developer centric tooling, especially the
Yes.
querying. It's a different language. Of course, it's a different language.
Hmm.
And so there's all those really kind of big aspects there from the engineering point of view that I think there's a selling point there. And I want to at least touch on this. We could put this on the parking lot, but I think we
Sure.
also need to obviously sell the actual visualization side. The more, to your point, business user leadership, how do you
Yes.
sell that? But I think those are really the two areas that you have to sell this to. It's the engineering life and it's the business life.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you on those 2 points, Tommy. But I think the ultimate note here for me, I'm looking at this going is, where's the strength of Power BI come from? I think that really the
Mm.
strength of it comes from like the ease of shareability and like the cost effectiveness of the semantic model and how fast it can run to produce queries for reports.
Mhm.
I don't see Google doing the same thing. They have
Yeah,
Google, I think it's Looker. Is there a version of it?
Data Studio now. It
Data
used to be
Studio
the
now?
yeah,
Okay. So they have a visualization program, and it's good.
fine.
I have found it extremely difficult to work in it, honestly. I'm coming from the Power BI world. It feels like Power BI is much easier to get started. The learning curve on Data Studio is much sharper compared to what I feel like just getting
Yeah,
started with Power BI is. Now, albeit say this, because Power BI has DAX queries, because Power BI has a lot more you can do in the DAX space, the analysis engine. Power BI, I think, has a lot more difficulty long term to become a master of the tool, right? Maybe there's a steep learning curve right now in Google Analytics, or let's call it Looker, versus Power BI, but you may be able to like master Looker much easier or much faster than Power BI because of all the semantic modeling that's occurring.
well, it's a limited platform. Like it does fine for basic visualizations, and you can connect to your data, but in terms of what the longevity of a semantic model in Power BI, it's completely almost like a different concept of your data model in both platforms, right? You don't have any equivalent of a semantic model in Google Data Studio. It's connect
Yeah,
to your data, put
correct.
these visualizations on from a query, and
Sure.
in a sense of recreating that, having that, the managed self-service, none of that exists in the data platform. We
But
don't
again,
have, you don't have managed self-service.
but back to your point though, like you're building SQL queries, or you're building queries that support the visual, and it's continually querying those visuals behind the
Right,
scenes every time you click on something, or you change something, or filter something. Like that's different than Power BI, because Power BI is technically taking a copy of the data,
right,
caching it, and then you're hitting the cache quickly to return the results. I mean, I don't. There's no concept of like refreshing
right,
in a Looker report that I'm aware of. Right?
right,
You're looking at all the data whenever you need
right.
it.
And
Right?
that's why they are like the visualization side of it. They're just different concepts. There's really no comparison between the life cycle of a model in Power BI compared to that even idea in Google Data Studio or Looker.
Yeah.
And here's the thing though too, you may say, and obviously we'd both argue that yeah, the Power BI model in the sense of the conceptual model is much more long lasting. It's better for a data culture. Sure, we may say that to a Google Data Studio client or a Google Analytics platform client, but they're also been dealing with this for a while. And then you go into the culture thing where they're just kind of used to it and they are fine with the basic visualizations because they've been dealing with that. Their pain points are probably around, in a sense, too, like that the culture thing. Like, because again, the only place I can view the data information is in Data Studio. I don't have this full, in a sense, like from a corporate metric point of view. You know what I've actually found? I found a lot of people who are more advanced visualization side teams building more complex reports are not using Data Studio with their data platform. They're Tableau.
Oh, interesting. So a Google shop would use advanced tooling for like visual building in Tableau.
Yeah, because Data
Yes.
Studio doesn't really accomplish that.
Okay. While I had a project, I had only one project that worked with,
Or
well,
click.
I've
Yeah.
had multiple projects working with Google, but I've had one project working with Tableau. And
Mhm.
again, I wasn't on that project part of it, but yes, the company had done that. They were paying for that, paying for Tableau, and paying for all the Google Looker Studio information as well, or Data Studio as
Mhm.
well, because to your point, it didn't have that rich experience that you needed. It couldn't connect and do what it wanted to do visually to
Right.
build those more complex visuals. And I think this is your point though, Tommy. I think your point is Power BI is a bit more of a refined tool from building visuals. There's a whole app studio that goes with it. You have things like Vega or the Deneb visual that enhance that substantially. You can build a lot more customized visuals using those tooling pieces.
Yeah, and to me, this goes to the selling point where to a shop that's not using Power BI, it's not enough to say, well, Power BI has a great visualization and metric based platform. To me, the selling point of Google is you kind of have to do the full migration because the model, long lasting product, the life cycle of the model, how it can live with other users, how you can build off of that, more than just the consumer based view, more than that, I can just view the report, right? Because to me, I'm not selling someone that's using Tableau right off the bat just because of how you can view the report. I could argue that the Power BI experience is better, but well, again, if I have to use Power BI, if I'm a Tableau shop or a Google shop, well, I have to now have a Microsoft Office or that credentials. I'm
Mm-hmm.
in this Power BI ecosystem. So now you're telling someone the thing that they don't want to hear the most. I have to go to 4 technologies to jump to see each of my data, like data points. That's the hardest selling point I've found with any organization. Is like, we're already using this. Now I have to log in here. Now I have to log in here. Now I have to go here to get the data. This is it's painful.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think if I had to look at like the different, like when I look at other platforms that need or require tooling, right? It always feels like there's a little bit more of like a bolt-on experience to them. Like it does a lot of what you need, but then it need a little bit more. Like even looking at
Yeah.
Tableau has the visualization program dialed in, but then there's what's the Tableau data engineering program?
Oh, it's like Google. Does have query in it. I know that.
Yeah, so the
Google Tableau, not Power Query, basically.
yes, it's like it's the Tableau version of Power Query. I'm
Yeah.
gonna try and Google it here. Data Studio or something like that. Data prep, Tableau Data Prep, I think is what it's called.
Data prep.
So it's their equivalent version of combining, shaping. I mean, a lot of these other tools, if you look at them, they're all doing the same thing, right? We've got these, and I think, in my opinion, Power BI kind of blazed the trail with this one. I don't think Tableau Prep was out before Power Query was
No,
out
that
initially.
was a response to Power BI.
Agree. And I think also Tableau Public was a response for Power BI launching Power BI Desktop with free, like Power BI Desktop was free for everyone. So, not having these other tools, other programs have had to like adapt and catch up to where Power BI is. So, I think now with Fabric as part of your solution inside Power BI, I mean, you can't touch it. There's not another tool out there that has like all the encompassing data products in one single solution.
So if you were talking to leadership at this, let's say, scenario, where do you think the most attractive points would be? And again, I'm going to challenge you to say not the engineering side, because I think we can well establish that. But if you're talking to leadership who may not have that same technology background, what do you think would be the most attractive points that you would kind of approach this with?
Well, I mean, if you look at leadership, at the end of the day, leadership wants to get the results they need at the price they want, right?
Mhm.
And so they're always going to try to minimize price compared to what they can deliver with the same result. So when you look at a project like Tableau or you look at a project like Looker, there's always this time to develop, and then there's the cost to
Yeah.
maintain and run the solution, right? So I think I'm going to try my best to really do like a fair apples to apples comparison of price between the two different products, right? Especially if you're going to leave the data inside Google and not migrate it over to Power BI. So if that's your plan, right? We have to keep it in Data Studio because that's where the data is generated. Google kind of has like their claws in you to some degree because you're not going to want to move the data because that potentially could get really expensive to
Mhm.
move the data to a different platform. So in that being said, you kind of have to make a decision point of like how much data can you move over to Power BI? What kind of licensing do you need for PowerBI.com? Because you're going to have to use that. I'm assuming that is also going to be there. Do you need to share data with your clients externally? What's that cost to you? Can you add the Looker or Tableau experience into your solution to get those kind of needs met? I think if you look at total cost of ownership between Power BI, Looker, Tableau, the combination of things, right? Depending on what you want to do with the data, if you're a shop that is, we're going to build data, we're going to have in dashboards, and we're going to embed them, I don't think you're going to get a cheaper solution or a more cost-effective solution than Power BI, because I don't think you're going to want to have, I don't think you're going to take Looker and embed it.
Yeah.
It has a limited amount of visual stuff, right? You're going to want to pair that with what you're saying, Tommy, is Tableau, right? So the Tableau picks up for the weakness that Looker has. So you pair that. So now you're buying two products. You're buying the Google product and you're not buying Tableau. Okay, well, Tableau doesn't cost you $10 per user for one. So that's expensive. It's more expensive there. And then on the flip side of this, what if you're trying to give it to your customers? How do you embed it? And everything I've read and done some research on for Tableau published to web, or their equivalent, their Tableau's embedded solution is actually quite expensive.
Yeah.
It's not very cheap. It's almost, in my experience, it's almost been 2x the cost to do Tableau embedding than it has been to do Power BI embedding. And now that we can go down to the F SKUs that are very small in size, you can build a really good data model and do it embedding at a much cheaper price point.
Yeah.
So I'm probably always going to try and figure out what is the price story that we're trying to do and sell to that, because it's a better value, bang for your buck at the end of the day.
And then this is where you tag team me. And then I would come in here because first, just to respond to what you said, the cost thing is such a big deal here and cannot be understated on what you're doing in Google BigQuery. And just purchasing Tableau alone, you're already at a cost point where it's comparable or more than Power BI or even a Fabric F1 SKU.
Yeah,
It's still insane what they're charging for Tableau, and that the barrier to adoption there is still so high. I'm coming in about the bottlenecks that I guarantee that they have from a process point of view. If you're using BigQuery and if you're a Google Analytics platform, you have very niche players at your organization who know how to use and use it well, the tooling, right? This is not any business user or any self-service going into BigQuery and this tool and getting their data in. All of this is relying on the data engineers more than maybe comparable AWS, but it's a very niche tooling with a very niche language, meaning there's very niche players, which then equals that you want data in, you need to change. It has to rely on those few players. This almost becomes a better selling point with Fabric because we say, well, we can get your data to more people. We can remove a ton of bottlenecks for you because the ability to get your data into not just a Power BI model, but into this platform for us to do reporting is near seamless. You can have your marketing team do this. It's not this terrible language adoption or this barrier of tooling and language. We know the UI is incredibly easy in Microsoft Fabric. Further, all your reporting and the metrics, and I guarantee you, because again, no one else really has this concept of the semantic model that lives across workspaces and across reports. We can remove, which again, I guarantee another pain point is the reuse or the overlapping of the same reports, which we would see a ton, because again, you have the purview or the idea of lineage doesn't exist in that robust view. So let's get your data to more people. Let's get the right data to people. And then we can also adopt that self-service where you need your marketing team, you need this business team to quickly create a report for your email campaigns. Well, you can see what's in the workspace, or you can quickly build off something existing. And once you have that set up, once you have that semantic model and the self-service set up, obviously we know that takes time. Oh my gosh, what that does for organizations to quickly build. Yes, we know there's an uptake time or, there's a build time, but once you actually have your models established, nothing in the industry compares to that.
I'd also maybe point out here too, Tommy, I think what you're speaking to is there is some more upfront building time, but it's the cost of the effort of the design cost, right? So it's the time and materials costs that go along with this, right? Once you have something established, once you have some semantic models that are there and working, now you've cached the data. It's incredibly efficient to run from that cache. And so if we're talking pure report building, the semantic model requires modeling up front, but once you've defined some basic relationships and some tables and brought them in, you're caching the data, and now you can build a lot more from that stack of tables, essentially.
Yeah. And
And
I
I
think
think,
that's a big misconception a lot of people have is that's not available.
well, yes, I agree with you. But I would also add a point here. My point was really around
Oh,
there's a hidden cost to doing that, right? Like there's a that's a man hours cost to doing that kind of stuff, and that's the part that's very hard to and difficult to measure. Like how do you measure how much time how you save me based on doing a build of report? That's the part there that's like, even again going back to
yeah.
my point earlier, right? It's all about price, and if I can do the more things in the same amount of time, that's much harder to quantify. And again, you don't know how fast it will take you until you've actually done it. And so this is one of these things where it's like a chicken and the egg standpoint, right? It could
Yeah.
save me money, it could go faster, but my team doesn't know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of people look at price per bar chart, basically.
I mean, it boils down to that to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Price per report page. Like, what does that look like? How quickly can we get through that? And here's something. This is not specific to just Tableau or Looker or anything. If your team is not dedicated and has someone you can bring on that is going to be the knowledge expert around Power BI, you really do need to go hire someone who's a Power BI person, or dedicate someone on your team to be that Power BI individual. In the past, I've seen organizations adopt Power BI, find some immediate success with my team building them reports,
Mhm.
and then they're like, okay, well, it's easy. Mike in the team did it. We're just going to
Yeah.
go hire some person who says they know how to do Power BI. They don't consult with me. They don't ask me what I think about their skills. And so it's someone who knows how to build some visuals in a Power BI report, but don't understand how to model things. They don't understand how to do updates and the administration part of this. So they under hire the talent for Power BI, and then they become disillusioned with the program and say, well, Power BI doesn't do what we want. It doesn't have the features we need. Well, and I said it's more about expectation, right? Their expectation wasn't aligned with the talents they brought on board, and so therefore they actually abandoned Power BI. They went back to their old tools. So I've
Yeah.
seen this happen a number of times where if you don't get the right skills in on those first couple of people you hire, you're going to be in a world of hurt, and it will probably make the old tools look more cost efficient because it's faster. You know how to do it. It's already knowledge. It's on your team. So there's something to say here for, like, if you're going to make the jump or you're going to sell Power BI into an organization that is already using things, you better come in with like a really solid, like, what problem are you solving? And the problem you're solving can be cheaper if you solve it with Power BI versus solving it with what the other tools you have are.
Let me pick up what you're putting down there because I love this point. I'll take a step slightly further here where I'm more and more coming to my own opinion that in order to really call yourself a Power BI pro, it's more than just your individual skill building a semantic model and doing all the things in desktop. You really have to know at this point how that model lives in the ecosystem and the longevity of a model, right? Because I can create myself in my own silo the best semantic model with the best stacks measures. Again, all subjective there, but like in a sense of like it could be phenomenal, perfect, best processing time. But if I'm publishing this and I have no idea how it works in terms of the greater organization, if it's in self-service, if all those other parts that make up really a model living well,
Hmm?
to me, then you're lost half the battle or more. And I think we're just at a point now too with Power BI that it's the data analyst has to know this, has to be aware of the consumer interaction with it. And if it's the thinking with the ability that we can build off of this, because this is also the selling point too on Power BI to any platform is Google Data Studio. It's siloed. I mean, even Tableau to a degree, the modeling is siloed in terms of the not just what you see, but everything in the back end, which
Mhm.
Power BI really has a selling point too. To your point, you can hire someone who's great at semantic modeling. His phenomenal DAX. They can compete with Marco Russo with DAX. But if they're just publishing models and there's not really from a cultural point of view, or organizational understanding there, you're going to still deal with problems. You're going to deal with siloing. You're going to deal with pain points.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I'm also just trying to like get my head around like your point there to some degree. Like there's if you don't take the time to invest in the skills, you're not going to be able to bring the cost down. Basically,
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a skills investment, and again,
right.
My experience has been development teams that come from the Google platform. They have hired intentionally, rightfully so, people that know the Google platform. That GCP is what they hire, right? And that's fine. They've worked on sending their people to training. They've gotten skills around that platform. Totally fine. Don't in my mind, there is no issue with what we're doing there. You're hiring for the tools that you need to use. The same needs to be applied to Power BI. If you're going to bring in the tool, you've got to the organization has to make a commitment to dedicating time from internal people to either learn it or go hire the talent that they're going to need to go use it to be an effective project. And this is regarding like all migrations to Power BI, regardless.
Which is funny because you feel Microsoft's selling point. I think I can't tell you how many times I've seen shops try to do Power BI in the cheapest way possible, because to them it is a bar chart based tool. It's I think I love Marco Russo's article years ago that he had to specify that Power BI is not a report based tool, it's a modeling based tool. This is the biggest misconception, even still today, is Power BI is the equivalent. Like, let's compare bar chart to bar chart in other tooling, and everything else they figure we don't need the whole Azure stack or the Google stack because it's Power BI. It's a report tool. And a lot of companies fall into that trap, Mike. I completely agree with that, where they need to hire that, but they're like, well, we just need people who can design reports.
I would agree with that one. I think the article that Marco is referring to, the Power BI is a modeling based tool. I think it's totally agree upon that one, right? You're taking data, you're caching it. I mean, if you didn't have the analysis services engine in the middle of, so raw data, analysis services, and then you have reporting pieces, if you didn't have the analysis service engine, Power BI falls apart. And again, for shops that already have Excel and the analysis services engine in Excel already, because that's also there as well, this is the holy grail of like really good reporting. Like that, nothing is faster. Microsoft touts this. Nothing is faster than the query engine inside analysis services. The engine, it can't. Nothing else can return queries quicker than that engine. It's super fast, but it's been very tuned over years, multiple years, 10 plus years of just designing an amazing engine that can quickly go grab and aggregate your data. So really like that. I think, if I had to go very technical here, the power of the analysis services engine comes from the fact that it can do its analysis, run the numbers from the model while the data is still in a compressed format. And then it can return the results in a somewhat uncompressed format for your visuals. And that's the point. That's the point there, right? Compress the data, make it highly efficient to store, and then do the analytics on the data while it's compressed. That's the big key difference here. Right. And then other platforms, I think, are doing something similar. And I think I've heard some rumblings that Google's doing some sort of caching in-memory query experience as well. I mean, it's going to be the way I think companies are going to continue to move forward towards.
They have to.
But to your point, Tommy, right? If you look at Power BI purely as a visualization tool, you're missing a lot of the performance or impact of that tool to your organization.
Right. And let me ask you, unless you had anything else on that, the question early wins here, because if your goal, which I love, is we got to start with a cost comparison, right? We got to start with the price. What?
Yeah. I mean, I think that talking point drives everything else that you're kind of working on, honestly. I mean, that the talking point of price, price is handled two ways. Price is like, how much am I paying for the software to run it? And the second part of the price is like, how much am I spending on my resources to run it, right? So those are the two. And one of them is very easy to quantify. The other one, I think, is a little bit more dodgy to quantify. You could use it like headcount, like how many more headcounts do I need to use Power BI, or do I need to reduce a headcount and replace with a Power BI headcount? Like that is maybe something that's quantifiable there. But if you're just talking about man hours, the amount of time it takes people to learn things and do something new, that's much more difficult to quantify.
Yeah. But it's funny though, you say that even though I think that's Microsoft's biggest selling point. It's harder to quantify, but we all know that in this tooling from the gold model, reusing it, self-service, and just the power, the user interface in general, we know that there's going to be less man hours
Mm-hmm.
and with less skill, at least on the initial build. But yet, it is also the hardest to quantify. So you're kind of put in a predicament. So let me ask you, early wins. If someone wanted to say, let's do a PCI, let's do a not PCI, is it PCI? Uh, or we're gonna do some. We're gonna initially test Power BI, and we're Google Data Shop. We're interested. We're hearing you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
So, what early wins could you show to demonstrate Power BI's value in that environment, whether maybe in Google or in Tableau? Where would you start focusing on? What can I do in the first 2 months?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think part of the strengths would be is, do you have any issues joining data together with various sources of information, right? So I would start looking at, hey, you have Google Analytics data. What data needs to be joined to the Google Analytics data? Are there any opportunities for you to start merging multiple locations together? That would be one area. I would also look for like other, so in most of my projects, there's always some sort of third party API you need to go
Oh yeah.
hit and go grab data from, or like there's companies are finding that it's very easy to go purchase a bunch of software, but that software doesn't necessarily integrate very well with your current data structure. So hey, I need to join internal company data with the Google Analytics data because Google Analytics is going to sit in Google's Data Studio. So, what does that join of information look like? How are you going to do that? Right? We need to tie our call center data to our leads data. Is that helping? Right? Or we need to tie our um, Google Analytics information to like help us project and forecast more in our manufacturing area. I don't know that correlation there looks like, but usually I find when organizations start trying to join data together, there's a little bit less friction if you're going to use Fabric and Power BI. And so that's one of the angles I would start with. I would start attacking from that angle. What data do we need to join together? Let's start talking about I like to step back and talk about the organizational data structure.
Yeah.
What do we have what is inside our organization, right? Do we have users? What do users do? What products do they buy? How do we sell things? So if we step back and say, where does the source of data or source of truth live on these various topic things? Even just very simply, you can break down any business and just say, what do you do? Right? I'm an airline, right? What are the things that you govern in your airline, right? We have people that travel on us. Okay, so there's customers that travel. We have planes that we manage. We have fuel and like all these other costs and things. So if you just draw on the diagram, like what are the key things that you do as a business, and then define the relationships between those things, right? People sit on an airplane, right? Management costs at the terminal. When you draw these things out on a diagram, you'll notice that each of these sources typically come from different places.
Mhm.
And so having a centralized like lake house or common area becomes incredibly important. So you have to figure out, how long will it take me to build a solution that lands the data in a common area, make tables of it, join those tables together, and ultimately get your reporting. And I think that's the kind of situation I start with. I start with that kind of story, because if you're just trying to do one data source, Google
Right.
Analytics, okay, fine,
Yeah.
just use Looker and just keep moving on, right? There's not a lot of extra value there, right? That's one of my stories. I'll let you give a story, Tommy, and I have a second story that I'm going to tee up here after you give
You slightly got mine, but no. It's funny. All the things that you said, I just want to respond to what you said because it's so true. You never said the word data culture, and it's really a hard selling word to say. But at the same time, everything you said is about data culture,
well,
right? Like,
those are the
no,
But those are the outputs of like what the data culture would
yeah,
do, right? So the data
right,
culture would say, look, we're going to sit back and we're not going to just
right,
focus on, hey, we just bought Salesforce. We're only going
yeah,
to focus on Salesforce, right? You're going to step back and say, okay, Salesforce is serving a part of our data need.
right.
When you step back and look at the big picture, Salesforce is part of it. Some of these SQL servers on prem are part of it.
And
Some of this API stuff and this other platform is part of it. This marketing initiative is part of it. Like when you step back and say, what are all the things we're doing as an organization to sell
uh-huh,
things? The story becomes much bigger. And that
yeah,
your story is what I want to talk to about why we want to use
because
Fabric and Power BI.
all of a sudden then you have ownership. You have the people's KPIs built towards these things. So yeah, I think that's a big point there. My story would be focusing on what I think would be one of their largest pain points is that source of truth. And it's building those gold models, focusing on what are those ever corporate or universal models or data that they may have and showing how that can be reused. Right. So we're going to create this metric. We're going to create your metrics once. We're going to create these relationships and define this once in a single model. And yet you have your 10 reports that you can build off of that and your entire team now and other people who were never part of Looker or, how to have that ramp up time can just drag and drop off that model. But to me would be over those gold semantic models and having that lineage, because that to me would be, look, we took the ramp up time, but now we have a single definition and a single place where this is refreshed. And I think that would be if I could do that in those first 2 months, that's where I feel I would get to the wall like, wow.
That's interesting you say that, Tommy, because that really feels like you're really tackling that first heavy unknown item for the customer, which is, I'm not quite sure what a semantic model is.
Yeah.
You're kind of approaching with like, if we can get a decent semantic model in front of people, once that model exists, it's much easier for people to go build reports on top of it and understand what's being built in that model. And I would agree with you, right? That is the easier experience there. And I think the price point, again, I'm just pulling up the Tableau pricing here for Tableau. If you're going to build anything in Tableau, a creator of content, right? If you're creating the report, now I don't know, there's probably other ways to get this a bit cheaper here, right? In the Tableau area, it's a viewer is $15 a month per person just to view the report. An explorer, you get Tableau's Pulse editing is $42 a month, and then the creator is $75 a month.
Whoa.
And that's on the basic Tableau, and it goes up even higher when your Tableau's enterprise. So the price point, I mean, if I'm looking at these things like a creator, like creating with Tableau Desktop, you have Tableau Prep Builder, so that's their version of Power Query, Tableau Pulse, which is their AI generated stuff, and then they have one creator license of Tableau Cloud. So that all comes with the 75. So it's a lot of things they're getting, but by comparison with Power BI, I get all of that for $10 a month, and people who need to view things at the same price as $10 a month for the viewer as well. But even if we are doing apples to apples comparison, right? Viewer, the price of Power BI to view a report is the same price as their price to create, like is equivalent to their creator price. Their creator price is like, I don't know, 6 times bigger than the price of just viewing the report for Power BI. So already you're at a point, and again, talking back to my earlier point, let's talk about cost, right?
Yeah.
Already we're at a place where, okay, maybe it does make sense for us to just go buy pro licenses for everyone and just start there. Or, even if, let's just say, okay, we're all going to be premium per user. Premium per user gives you huge size models, all the premium features that you need in Power BI. That's $20 per month, and that's still cheaper than one of their creators, right? I mean, it's also cheaper than their Explorer, half as cheap as that. Like, so now when I look at the solution, I'm going, my gosh, this is a very compelling story with a lot less cost. And now I could have people, like, when you get to Power BI premium per user, you've got data flows, you've got storage of data, you've got all these semantic models. You go to 100 model size. Like, the model becomes a non-issue. You can build basically whatever you want at that point.
Maybe your selling point in the beginning is you buy everyone in leadership a steak dinner, and you say, I bought the steak dinner between the price difference between Tableau and Power BI.
Oh my goodness, dude. I don't know. Yeah, but that's a very big statement. But
a surf and surf kind of thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that way. So again, very compelling to see like the pricing just purely just to buy the software is way different. So, that's my point there. But, the trick of this whole thing is, can you understand the data well enough? Can you shape the data quickly enough to get a semantic model that is useful to the organization? I'm going to go on a limb here based on what you said, Tommy. And this is a challenge I see in every organization, not just Tableau or Google.
Where you're going. Yeah.
I think the issue is access to data. And maybe I'm going to take a little bit different route here, but if you just said, team, what is your challenge to what's going on? My guess is there's going to be in other platforms, and this may be true in some platforms, but not all of them. I don't know. Again, it depends on your data culture to this point. I think a lot of times there are issues with individuals just not having access to the information. And so, how can we securely give you flexibility to build whatever you need to build to get your reporting done? Now, I know, Tommy, this is going to rub you the wrong way because you love the enterprise down, you love the certified level of things, and we're going to give it up to the organization. But if we truly want the organization to build whatever they feel like they need to run their daily jobs, they're going to then they're going to copy data out of the systems. They're going to put it in Google Sheets. They're going to transform the data, and they're going to use it in whatever reports or visual things they're going to build in eventually, right? So if we want to give the company more capabilities, I really feel like desktop is like the solution, or Power BI is the solution. It really gives them a lot more capability, and you're not really throttled by, do I have access to the information? So I'm more of the hybrid approach, right? IT should be focusing on how can I get you access to data in a secure way and let you build what you want. That's to your point earlier, Tommy. Let's build a semantic model. Here you go. Build whatever you want. Now you understand how to make this stuff work. Like that's getting access to the data faster than having to wait for some team to build a Looker report, to build the next Tableau report, and like all these other things.
Yeah, you use the word feel a lot, and this is what we feel we want to do. Mike, if I did everything off what someone felt like they want to do, my daughter would never do homework. So first off, and I do agree to a point to what you're saying, and like it is true. Like I've definitely adopted more because of this podcast and the conversations, much more of the primary approach would be a managed self-service or something like that to
Yes.
really give
Yep.
access. I've definitely lent and converted to that type of stance.
And that's not to
But
say that there's not still some sort of central IT, very
that'd be
regulated data. Like
right,
it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. I don't have to have
right,
one and only one of these things. You can still have very governed. Hey, look, you only get access to these reports. You're not touching these models that are enterprise. That's
100%.
okay. That's part of the plan. But I'm saying what I'm trying to illuminate is there are a certain amount of questions I can ask about data that support that enterprise centralized model. But then there's also a lot of like peripheral needs. The questions change. We really don't know what we're looking for. We're just trying to hunt and peck and explore, right? It's those kind of needs, that the exploration of things, that I think that's a lot of what organizations are doing. And so Power BI serves that as well, where you can build a central model and give access to teams to explore things. And one thing I want to point out here, Tommy, that I've been just generally observing from PowerBI.com, PowerBI.com has a lot of new features that are in PowerBI.com that are very different than like other, how do I say this? Not other platforms, but like an exploration, right? There's
Mhm.
these things
Oh,
called
yeah, I love that.
explorations.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's purely I'm exploring some data and I'm trying to figure out what the data is doing. But the data explorations are something that can be only created in the service, built in the service, saved in the service, and explorations are only part of Fabric, right? So if you can look at them, you can use them in Power BI Pro, but if you want to save them or turn them into a report, that's a Fabric-based experience. So
Right.
you're starting to see a lot more of these, like, metric sets are now there. You have
I was gonna bring that up.
scorecards, like, but these are the kind of things that when I look at the service now, I'm thinking, oh man, yeah, we have these really strong things called semantic models, but now we're getting a lot of rich other features that are only service based. I can't build a metric
Right.
set in desktop. You just go to service and do it. So, even just turning on Power BI, you're getting more capability to govern, administer that data in a centralized way. And so maybe the selling point here is, look, Tableau is just doing reporting. Looker is just doing a page of reports. They don't have any concept of a metric set. Let's talk about our KPIs. Let's build those things into enterprise things. So I think if you think about like the analytics platform as Power BI as a whole, that analytics platform is becoming much richer compared to these other tools. So now maybe the selling point is, hey, let's highlight. So going back to the question, right? How do I sell this to a Google company? Talk on the features that they don't have. Hey, look at this exploration thing. Hey, look at this um, KPI metrics or this metric sets. These are other aspects of Power BI that you just don't get in these other tools. There's no concept of them at all. So I think in that regard, maybe you focus a bit more on these
Yeah.
other features that are directly there. And maybe the story around data science is somewhat compelling. I'm not sure how strong it is yet in Fabric, but
we'll talk about that in Q2.
Yeah, maybe Q2. But maybe the idea here is like you can do data engineering right alongside your analytics, and so you can bring these two teams or these two worlds together in a much more centralized way. And I don't see, if I think about like what happens in AWS and Looker and Google, those teams are still two very distinctly different teams. There's not a lot of, in my opinion, there's not a lot of joining of like the person could be doing both those activities together in the same tool.
And the metric set thing here, Mike, is where I'm going to be slightly closing thoughts because you got me super excited. You could tell the organization, you know what, you want to build a bar chart and that's your focus. Yeah, choose your tool. Doesn't really matter. They're all going to have, nice sparkly features and comparable. But you talk to a data engineer and their focus is the table and that's the source of truth. You talk to the business, their source of truth is the number, the overall what number we're aggregating. So if you're trying to do some definitions, if you're trying to have security and self-service at the same time, oh my gosh, these metric sets right now. I mean, what a great place, because guess what? Guess what you can do in a metric set besides just view it? I can go to a metric set and I can explore the data, or I can build off of that, right? I can do the managed self-service off the metric set, not the semantic model, which makes a ton more sense to a business user rather than, hey, build a model. You're like, I don't know what that is. So you build these metric sets, which again, no tooling has. Yeah. And then you can see your pretty bar charts. But the fact that we have these definitions here, and to me, that's my biggest concern with any access, is making sure there's clear definitions and everyone knows where to go for the right thing.
Yes.
That's a great place where metric sets are. And again, those other little features we haven't talked about are wonderful selling points.
Yeah, I think that's maybe an opportunity where you can like really leverage the advantage of Power BI to do that one. So it has to be doing something. I think I remember recently on a sales call that Microsoft gave at the end of one of their quarters, they said there's over 30 million active users in Power BI every day. And I think they said over like 190,000 Fabric organizations or Fabric users on like and growing quickly. So, I mean, I think Microsoft is taking the right approach here of taking a lot of the other data products that they have and then joining them with Power BI, because Power BI is a winner. It's clearly a winner. It's a good product. It resonates with people. It solves problems basically at the right price. So I think that's the reason why people are kind of flocking to it, is it solves good problems at the right price point. And oh, by the way, we get all these extra Fabric things that enhance the experience. And so now a lot of the other Fabric products we had across the organization, we now don't need to go back to Azure to go build more data factories. We don't need to go back to Azure to go build Synapse. We don't need to go back to Azure to go build data science things. We can start bringing those workloads directly inside Fabric. And now with a one button press, I can turn these other things on and it's easy. And that to me is like the selling point there, is it's the integration of all the different systems, which is really making this seamless and much easier to manage and configure. So awesome. Well, I thought this was going to be a short episode. I didn't think we were going to do a full-on episode on just a mailbag, but thank you very much for your question. Really appreciate it. We love doing these. Make sure you find more of those and submit those on our website. But I just want to wrap here and say thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate your listenership. If you like this conversation and hopefully maybe some of these talking points resonated to you about selling to or adopting Power BI, if you're a AWS or Google shop, we would encourage you to kind of look at Power BI as well. That being said, make sure you follow us. We don't do any other promotion other than it's word of mouth. So if you wouldn't mind, share with somebody else that you like the podcast, you found something useful here. And with that, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. And please share with friends, since we do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tip/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.